All right, we're live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Meet and Confer session. It is Monday, April 26, 2021. It's 4:16. We're going to go ahead and get started. Does one of the team members mind sharing their screen with the slides for today?
I can do it.
Thank you, April.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. All right, cool. So there we go. Little red in the background. And before we get started, I just wanted to say it's been 3 years to the day since the day of the Red for Ed walkout. And I just wanted to preach a little bit of solidarity to everyone in this room that was a part of that, one way or the other. And to everyone watching at home, thank you for your continued advocacy throughout the times here in Arizona. I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Jay Barbuto, PECTA co-president, proud teacher at Edison, and the Meet and Confer co-chair.
Marnie Burris, PECTA secretary, third grade teacher at Lowell, and also co-chair of the Meet and Confer team.
April Pettit, music teacher at Dunbar Elementary.
Chelsea McCaslin, sixth grade teacher at Edison.
Diana Anton, sixth grade math and science teacher at Lowell Elementary.
Karen Merkley, music teacher, Capital Elementary.
Felina Rodriguez, ELA teacher at Garfield Elementary.
Good afternoon, everybody. Victor Diaz, Director of Human Resources.
Hello, everyone. Shelman Brown, Director of Curriculum and Instruction.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sylvia Bernal, Principal at Garfield.
Good afternoon. Gina Millsaps, proud Principal at Paul Lawrence Dunbar, home of the Dragons.
And Dirk Olmsted, I'm the Principal at Capital School.
All right. Well, without any objections, I'm going to go ahead and get started, if that's okay with you, administration team. Cool. All right. So the first proposal we wanted to go over today was proposal number 1, which was the salary schedule. We just wanted to let you know that for the most part, we agree to the language that you sent in the counter language proposal. Without getting to the very specifics, it basically states that this decision will be made as one of the subcommittees of the Pathways to Success Committee. So one thing that we agree to that. And one thing we would like to be added to the proposal, though, Dr. Diaz, would be that the recommendation is, whatever recommendation is created and agreed upon will be added to the professional agreement document at the conclusion. Is that something the district can agree to? I know we did something similar to Prop 301. So what's your thought process on that?
Well, first and foremost, I'm very happy to hear that we have some agreement here. In terms of this added language, I'll just have to take a closer look at it. And I can have that in a response by Thursday at 5 p.m.
Great. Yeah, we look forward to the I get the name wrong every time, but the Pathways to Success Committee. I know that we have a good union representation on there, and I know there's a lot of assets from the district that will make sure that whatever comes of this will be best for the educators of this district. So we're looking forward to seeing that. And like I said, it sounds like you'll have not necessarily a counter, but an answer to this by Thursday at 5. Correct?
That's correct.
All right, sounds good. So moving on to proposal number 3, which is Prop 208. We also, because it's kind of similar here, but we also agree to the counter language proposed by the district, which states that, basically the decision of the Prop 208 will be made in a subcommittee of the Pathways to Success. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but that's basically what it says. And same thing, our recommendation is that whatever the recommendation that is created is agreed upon and will be added to the PECTA Phoenix #1 professional agreement document. So it'll kind of always be there in writing between the association and the district. So thoughts on that? I'm assuming I know what you're going to say now, but.
Yeah, very same. And on this anniversary of Red for Ed, also thank folks for the organizing you did around Invest in Ed. And really look forward to seeing this one playing through.
I do have one follow-up question about 208, and it's kind of a yucky question, not yucky that anything the district did, but just yucky statewide, right? Has district gotten any guidance yet from any of the alphabet organizations about the potential draining of 208? Or are we kind of just ignoring it until it happens potentially? Where do we stand with that right now?
Yeah, good question. To my knowledge, we haven't. I received information from ASPA, Arizona School Personnel Administrators, but I also haven't seen anything from ASBO or from ASA or from ASBA. I know they have their own advocacy arms. I'm not always locked into those channels. And I haven't seen anything from them though on as far as what's happening at the Supreme Court level or what's happening at the legislative level with some of the bills that have been introduced this year.
Right, and just to clarify for those people at home, there's a Senate bill running right now that, without getting too into the weeds, will basically cut 208 almost in half. And there's a chance that the Supreme Court could knock it off altogether. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done on our end and on everyone's end to make sure we're protecting those funds. But fingers crossed, we hope it goes through, and then we can work at the pathways table to make sure everyone gets the funding they deserve. So, okay, great to hear. We look forward to your responses for Prop 1 and Prop 3 on Thursday at 5. So we just wanted to get some good news out of the way, some agreements, and go from there. So thank you, Dr. Diaz.
Okay, and then I want to talk about Proposal 8, and we actually broke Proposal 8 because it was such a vast proposal, and we realized that we were actually asking for 3 different things. So we broke Proposal 8 into 3 separate parts, and I'm going to talk to you about Part A. And I don't really want to waste your time, so I'm going to get just straight into the ask. So our ask is for differentiated PD that would take into account teacher needs and skill level. Oh, can you go back, please? At this, are there any questions about that, or do you have any counters to that at this time?
Just for clarification, is this referring to on the Mondays or the Wednesdays or whatever the early release day ends up being, or are you speaking about a broader series of offerings throughout the year that may be on time that's not already district-wide PD?
I think we would be open to the second option, Dr. Brown. I think what we're looking for, though, is we would like maybe some of those Monday PDs or whatever the half day ends up being. We would like maybe some of those to be differentiated, because what's ending up happening is we've got teachers who are vastly past the skill set that's being taught. It seems like a lot of times the PDs, especially when they're content related, are teaching to the lowest common denominator, and that's frustrating for a lot of teachers. And we understand that, yes, there are going to be PDs where you're going to get a repeat of information, but I think it would be really helpful if we had that differentiation somewhere.
Thank you.
So also as a clarity question, I understand what you're saying in terms of Proposal 8 has quite a bit in it, and you're looking to break it into 3. In Proposal 8A, then, are you still proposing the numbers 1 through 6, where differentiation is really only the first of the proposals? The other 5 may sort of touch on differentiation, but they seem to be substantially different than just asking for differentiation. So can you explain a bit more about what the proposal is then?
I believe that we did send that in our Thursday communication, but essentially we did break it into 3, and I'm really only talking about bullet point 1. that we are asking for there to be differentiated PD. So actually, I have a question, and my question is, what is the PD plan for the entire year, and when will teachers have access to it?
I'm sorry, we're just so I can make sure we understand that. So we're only talking right about 8A1 in the meet and confer proposals from PECTA.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And so your question is, what is the professional development plan and when would it be shared?
Yes.
I can let Dr. Brown answer with some more specificity, but I could definitely say from the 301 committee's perspective, it's something that's changed a couple of times this year with all of the everything from the COVID virus pandemic and the havoc that it's actually wreaked on just trying to plan anything out more than a couple of weeks in advance. And so we've definitely seen changes to it made. I know we discussed them earlier, meet and confer, when we talked about changes we still have to make to the Prop 301 plan. But Dr. Brown, do you want to speak a little bit more about what the sort of normal rhythm is in terms of the professional development plan?
Sure, and I won't commit to any specific dates because I think most people know there are a lot of moving pieces and personnel in the CNI department right now, and so there are many unexpected shifts that make it a little more difficult for people to plan or commit to exactly what the PD plan will be. I will say that we anticipate a rotating basis again, where we have our district collaborative team meetings on whatever the monthly rotation happens to be, third Tuesday, whatever it is. Our content specialists are definitely working towards building out what those CNI half-day early release days could be. They've looked through the curriculum feedback and also through some of the feedback that they've received through the various PDs along the way, and are trying to decide what might be helpful and how they can collect more feedback. But as far as that overarching bigger picture PD plan that Dr. McLaughlin has provided in the past, that funnels all the way from what's the district level staff doing to here's what principal leadership training needs to be to now here's what that means for schools. That part, we have a new chief academic officer coming on board. And so I would be hesitant to commit her to any plan without letting her first sort of get her feet wet a little bit and see what's already happening.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. And I do appreciate that answer. But my next question is, I guess still, will teachers have access to this prior to the beginning of the school year?
Again, in a good world, if all stars aligned, that would be something that I would hope we could expect. But with the number of moving pieces, you guys hopefully have come to know that I'm a truth teller and a straight shooter when I can be. And so since I know that I cannot guarantee it, I don't want to guarantee it, only to say that in general, as a professional practice, that's the ideal, and that we strive for the ideal whenever possible.
Okay, and just so I can clarify, I hope I'm not being obtuse, and that is not at all my intention, but just for clarity's sake, as of now, it's not going to happen. Like, we can't say definitively that it's going to happen, that we will have this information before the start of the school year.
Not definitively.
Thank you. And then one final question, and I'm so sorry, I just have a lot of them today. My question is, how will teacher feedback be utilized to create and build out that PD schedule?
That's one of those things that we always try and keep in mind, is what are teachers saying that they need. And so typically at the end of a PD, there's a combination of feedback that we end up getting. Sometimes it's the survey. This year, since we were virtual, it was those electronic links that Lauren Ashmore was sending out. But we have a lot of conversations that happen between our curriculum alignment specialists and our tech integration specialists and with teachers, whether it's through office hours or through informal conversations, emails, etc. And so they always try and hear what is it that people are saying that they need. And then if possible, we provide it within the limitations of 2 hours every other month, with the understanding that sometimes, even though teachers have provided feedback, we'll offer something during office hours because we'll know teachers are struggling with this thing. But by the time a CNI Monday, for example, came around, it'd be 6 weeks later. So you may not have that same exact need, but the people were available to support you leading up to that. So it's one of those where they're always going to take the feedback into consideration. They're always going to talk to as many people as they can to try and understand where the need is coming from? Is it something that can be handled with a phone call, or do we need an entire PD? That's about all I can promise, though, is that they'll keep listening, they'll keep asking, they'll keep building it out. And to your point, also, there are some things, if you have a brand new resource, we're gonna have to have a getting started type training just to make sure everyone has that baseline information before you can build off any further.
100%. I guess what I want to really leave everyone with is that we understand that as a team, we're 100% on board with that, but we really want the opportunity after those getting to know the resource professional developments. We really would like the opportunity for the teachers who've got it to be getting things that are immediately applicable to their classrooms. And I mean, also going along with that, with differentiated PD, having special area specific professional development, because it's not very helpful for a music teacher to be in a professional development about science. Or a special education teacher is going to need a different PD than I as a self-contained third grade teacher.
Yep, I would agree. And to the maximum extent possible, the team is always going to try and build that in. There are a lot of needs in a very, very small team, and we don't officially have a district-wide professional development budget. Like, there's not an unlimited pool or even a limited pool of money that we can really even pull from. So in terms of what we can provide or commit to providing versus what the ideal would be, we're going to be somewhere in the middle of that piece. And so when we can, I know that our special education team at the district level does pull special education teachers from time to time on some of those early release days specifically for special education. What we tried to do this year was to work in collaboration with our special education team, because these are all of our kids all day, and say, if this is the resource, do most special education teachers also need to know how to use this resource, or do they also need to know this piece, so that then they can take it to that next step of how to differentiate, with the goal being, yeah, now we need to take it to that next step of, now how do I use it differently? But there is a partnership and I have a very good.
Did Dr. Brown freeze for you guys too?
Yeah, she did.
With our special education team, meeting everyone's needs. Did I freeze?
You
did.
froze.
Am I back?
You're
Am I
back.
back?
You're back. I think we missed the last part.
I was just saying that we're working with our special education team, with Alicia Zalvis, with Margaret West, with as many people as we can, to say, is this something that everyone needs? Because our special education teachers also received iReady, for example, so that they have that baseline understanding first. And then now, how does this really apply? I think it's that how does this really apply piece that people are probably looking for to take it to that next level as we move forward.
Dr. Shelman, to add to that, you mentioned the fact that, with the new curriculum that was implemented this year, we had to start from a base. But just out of curiosity, did you ask, I don't recall, but was there a survey conducted and identifying whether teachers had experience with any of this curriculum? Because I know for myself, I came from using Ready Math, and a lot of those PD times were unfortunately not beneficial due to the many previous PDs I had attended with Ready Mathematics. So just, this is kind of where that differentiation is coming in, because various teachers may have had experience with this curriculum or Amplify Science and Discovery, but our time wasn't quite utilized to the best possibility. Learning maybe more of the implementation or addressing a certain area of students. So this is part of the reason as to why we are asking for differentiated PDs.
Yep, I hear that. That's fair. No, we did not survey to see who all had used a resource at any point in time. And so to that end, I'll say, nope, we did not. That's a good question. Duly noted.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
No need to apologize for asking for what you need.
And I have a question for the principals. Do you all feel like, I guess the perfect example here is to use would be Benchmark, because Benchmark's been around for 2 or 3 years now, correct? Sorry, I'm not a Benchmark guy, but I believe 2 or 3 years.
This would be year 2. This would be our second year where it's an expectation K6.
Cool. So thank you, Dr. Brown. So principals, do you feel like your staff has been adequately professionally developed in terms of, growth? Do you think there's some teachers that are advanced at benchmark and maybe they're getting stuck behind in some of these professional developments? Or do you see differentiated PD happening with benchmark?
I had trouble unmuting. I think I'm not going to use the example of benchmark. I can probably speak a little bit more to iReady Math. And I know that because we have the funding for next year, we are already working on, providing that consultancy support, so then teachers will get very unique support based on, their level of expertise, their comfort, with the program. So we are seeking some differentiated, I guess, professional development coming out of iReady. I think with, I hate to say it, but I think I'm going to jump, to your side right now, Jay, and we're all on the same side, right? But I do think that differentiated PD is critical because from my experience, I'm going to go back to FOSS science, and I remember when we first started implementing FOSS science, we received extensive support, and we had coaches come in, they helped us, develop the plans, implement the program. And then let's just say 2-3 years down the line, that support was not there for the new teachers implementing the program. So I think I'm looking at it from the other perspective where, sometimes we get new teachers that need that extensive support with the curriculum programs that we're offering. And unless we do have title funds, available, we can provide that support or not. So then that becomes part of our PD plan. I think that it's a valid proposal that is worth, looking into. And that's my experience.
Sorry about that, Mrs. Bernal. So I have another, it's not really a question, I guess it's more of an ask. And I'm sorry, my cat is like, she wants to be part of this. She's really excited. Another ask that we have is just more than differentiated professional development in our curriculum resources. We're also asking for professional development that helps us grow as teachers, and obviously what each teacher needs to be more successful and to become more effective year after year, because honestly, you should never stop learning as a teacher, right? So we're asking for differentiation there as well, because we need to be as effective as possible for our students.
Can I speak to that? And I want to say ditto what Mrs. Bernal said. Because as a school site, we're always looking at how to support teachers with their levels of learning and what they need support in, because it's almost like looking at students with individualized plans, correct? With that piece, then and I can speak only for Dunbar, but I'm always looking for opportunities to grow my staff. So they have choice. So any PDs that align with whatever our school foci are, I offer those professional development opportunities. For like Kagan trainings or anything that will help to support teachers in their professional development. So if that's student interaction, anything that would complement the curriculum or align. So we have offered, like we're a 95% group school, we've offered additional professional development there. But I think that that's the ultimate goal for us all, right? Is that even as principals and as instructional leaders on our campus, we know how important that is to provide those opportunities for our staff, and so we definitely do.
Thank you, Ms. Millsaps. That's really awesome. And we love to hear that. That's fantastic. We just would love to see that across the district at every school. We want that to be the norm.
And I think Mrs. Bernal had something to say too.
I think I just wanted to add to Gina's point is that I think we do offer it, but it's just not necessarily, I don't think we're as intentional as we could be, right? I know that there are many times when we have a large population of English learners. So every time I come across, a PD opportunity that focuses on that, I send it to my staff. I invite them to, sign up for the PD and all of that. So those are what I would say they're more self-led, because obviously if I'm already feeling pretty confident with my delivery of, second language acquisition strategies, then I'm probably going to pass on it, and somebody else, will get the opportunity to attend. However, that, I now reflecting on it, I know that has not been a part of the year-long PD plan that we develop in the summer. Can it be a part of it? Yeah, I think it can be a part of it, where we are always seeking for those opportunities for that differentiation. Like I said, I think this is a valid proposal, and we all know, we've learned, a lot about adult learners and how we never grow. We are never there. We're always growing, and that we do need to provide choice and differentiation.
So can I?
Oh, go ahead, Dr. Brown.
Oh, sorry, Dr. Diaz. I was just going to say what I'm hearing, kind of what I'm wondering about, again, with the proposal and the language, on the CNI core side of the house, if we're looking at the amount of time that's just for the district PD days, it's only 2 hours once a month, and so about 16 hours maximum during the school year that we have available. And so the majority of that time does end up going back to schools as far as the site-based learning time. And so I think that's also our greatest opportunity for that differentiation, because each school has their own goals, their own district, their own site level plans, et cetera. So I would say yes to differentiated PD when we can, with the understanding that, again, at the district level, there are certain things we're going to have to push out, and things like the resource training, for example, the fastest way to not have to do resource trainings is to actually have the data when we log in to iReady, for example, indicate that kids are using the program, so that we have reason to believe that teachers are already knowing how to log in and those sorts of things. So that part can go away faster once we have evidence that the program is being used, if that's one of those things that only needs to be offered to new teachers, et cetera. But at the site level, if there are ways that the team can support site level principals, I know several principals have reached out to Mary Lou and Kristen, for example, and said, help us with our EL population. How can we work on this particular thing? And so that's something that my team is happy to continue supporting, is whatever that site level focus is, either trying to help you find the resources or helping point you in the direction that you need to go as far as potential support. But at that district level, we may not be able to get to that level of specificity that some teachers are looking for when they say differentiation. It may not be as finely tuned as it would be at a site level PD.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. I really appreciated that. Sorry, Dr. Diaz. So I want to get this out. I'm sorry. I'm very, I will lose it if I don't. I apologize. So I feel like we have had some differentiation at the district level, as far as, like, if you think of benchmark advance, it's always differentiated by grade level. And that's awesome. But I guess I have a hard time seeing why we can't also then take it to a more, like, maybe you need more help with the independent group time part of benchmark advance, or maybe you need help understanding how to use the writing piece of that. I just feel that if we're going to utilize these programs, we really have to train the teachers to use it properly, because we can't use it with fidelity if we don't know how to use it correctly.
Agreed. I think we're saying the same thing, but seeing it slightly differently. So yep, we need to make sure that you know how to use it, and then get into that more specific, now, how do you use it for a particular purpose? again, we have one math person for all of K-12 for the entire district. And so if she's leading a PD, she can't offer 4 different PDs at the same time, unless some of them are asynchronous, which people have said they love it. People have said they hate it. Like we get the feedback we get is always at whatever the extreme is. We get all of the extremes and then a lot in between. And so to be just completely transparent, the number of bodies we have available to do the work is always going to limit what we can differentiate at that district level versus what can happen as it funnels down a little bit more. Especially if it has to happen in those 2 hours at that exact time.
I'm so sorry. I just have one
Don't
final
apologize.
question.
Ask for what you need.
So my question is, so I understand what you're saying. I know we have limited funds. I know we only have the one body for math, but can we utilize our teachers who are highly effective and highly trained in those curriculums? Like we have Diana, who has been using Ready Math for a very long time. Could we maybe get her providing some of those professional developments for teachers who need a little something more?
We have had some teachers who have agreed to work with some of our CNI staff. Sometimes it's not followed through on with some of our volunteers, and other times it's worked out well. So if you are listening and you have expertise in a particular area, by all means, email that content facilitator and volunteer, or say, if you're willing to offer a train the trainer, sign me up. I want to be the science lead, because the team is open to that. We just have not had some consistency in some of the folks who volunteered also then being able to complete that work.
So if I may, Marnie, in terms of just where we're at with this item, I'm just trying to be mindful of time. By limiting this to only look at 8A1, 8A1 only has a what? I think we have an agreement on the why. I think we have an agreement on the what in terms of differentiation, but I think what the proposal needs is a bit more clarity in the how. And I think that's what a lot of your questions have been driving at. So to sort of summarize from here, as I've been taking notes on hows, sort of working backwards. One of them you just mentioned was more collaboration with teachers as facilitators. Another one is surveying folks before professional developments take place, or using input survey and not just feedback, but also using feedback, I think, is a third how we've heard so far. And then choice has been another how that's come up quite a bit. I think what you're going to see, and this was in the chat, and I agree, there's more flexibility with those things oftentimes at schools than there may be at the CNI or the district level. But as I think about the hows, again, just to sort of summarize what those were: choice, input, I'll just call that like a pre-survey, feedback, as well as shared facilitation. Are there other hows that you're seeking in terms of where this proposal is? Because I wouldn't want to, again, just agree to, yes, we will differentiate. I think it's important that we're specific about what approach we're asking principals and supporting principals, as well as the curriculum instruction department.
Yeah, sorry, I'm processing everything you just said. But that idea floated into my head too. It's like, okay, so I'm glad, first of all, Mrs. Bernal, I'm glad you said you're on my side. It's a dark place, but I'm glad you're there. Second of all, what does that actually look like? Because it's great, Mrs. Bernal, that you're saying that, but how do we craft that into something that is actually held, like, not even principals, but staff and everyone are held accountable to make sure that we're doing it. So yeah, Vic, I appreciate you bringing that into the room, because that's probably the next step.
I don't know if we're in the writing pieces of this. Could it be that, just like what we have right now, Dr. Brown, where, one, early release is dedicated to district CMs, another one was CNI. There could probably be, a little differentiation there. One is like site-based, school-wide focus, so I know that, for example, Ms. Millsap's, they're working on AVID, right? So they would need to meet together as a staff to, continue that work. And then the fourth, early release of the month could be the differentiated piece where, you have a choice of, at the site level of how that can be completed.
Just being mindful of time, I wonder if what we can do from here is, as an administrative team, we can huddle up and we can think about options like that we may be able to present in terms of what are the sorts of things that where we could find current practices are most malleable. The other piece of that would be some kind of a check-in. We've talked about this in past years where we make sure to revisit certain items, like we had the class size committee established for class sizes. We had a sort of budget check-in with one another established for looking at carry forward budgets. This could be another place where at some point in, I would say maybe November or December, we could revisit to say, hey, we said we were going to do more intentionality, in Ms. Bernal's point, around choice, around options, around input. What have we seen so far? What's working? What could work better? So I wonder if at this point we could take some time as an administrative team to craft that out and have something for you all by Thursday at 5.
Dr. Diaz, that sounds amazing. Thank you.
Dr. Diaz, I just want to throw in something that Dr. Brown, put out there, is that we do have a new CAO, and with the input of that person, would that change some of the calendaring for next year? So just something that as we sit down and have conversations, to throw that out there.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think we're going to move. I appreciate that discussion. That was a really in-depth, great look at that. I appreciate both sides taking a look at it. So we're going to move on to part B of Proposal 8 now. And then we're going to throw it to Miss Pettit.
Hey, that's me. So our ask is that the district and we ensure that community organizations are there to support us in improving our craft and ensuring we as educators remain connected and build relationships with our community. And how can the district help us and ensure that this is happening?
So with this proposal AP, just to be clear, this is in reference to implicit bias, anti-oppressive culture, professional development that is related to trainings that are already occurring in the district related to equity. Is that part of the proposal still?
Yes.
And the main reason why we brought this to the table, Dr. Diaz, was we saw the presentation from WestEd, I believe, and we appreciate their recommendation for having this anti-bias training, et cetera, et cetera. And in their, I almost said manifesto, not manifesto. In their document, they mentioned looping up with community partners and having that be part of this plan. So this is really where that stems in. So we took part B that we had and we kind of trimmed it down to this because we already saw the work that WestEd recommended. And so this is the part of it that we want to ensure is still is going to happen, because we feel like valuing our community means reaching out to them and using them as partners. So
can you give me an example of what that would look like? Or what you all have in mind?
Jay, can I answer that? So a big one could be, for example, we have a lot of community organizations. For example, Transgroup Pueblo can talk about anti-bias in regards to our LGBT students and incorporating and valuing LGBTQ LGBTQ student identity. You have Puente Human Rights Campaign, who can talk about trauma and forced learning in regards to how it affects our migrant populations and students with mixed statuses. You have Demand to Learn from the ACLU campaign, which is also a community organization in which families and parents speak and address school pushout to help us improve as teachers in regards to how our craft also is shaping and pushing out students of color and students with disabilities. So these are all community organizations that are doing the work here in Arizona, especially in the school districts that we work at. So in ensuring that we work with them, not only are we fostering that community relationship, but we're also learning more from our communities and from our own families as well.
Thank you for that. So in terms of formalizing this sort of an agreement or partnership, are we looking at something where teachers stay after school on a Tuesday for these sorts of conversations or commitments? Or would it be, are you thinking more where schools would look and say, here's our community, here's a neighborhood organization that we want to work closely with, and that may happen during a site meeting, it may happen during PD time, it may happen on a Tuesday over coffee? Like, do you have a specific structure in mind or time commitment for any of it?
No, so we don't. And it's not because we're not prepared or don't want to schedule it. It's just we felt like we needed to have this conversation first before we saw where to go from there, right? If you pull up, I don't know if anyone has that document we were looking at. Chelsea, I know you thought you had the access to it.
Give me just like 60 seconds to find the page.
Give you exactly 60 seconds.
We have a good idea.
So as Chelsea does that, because I definitely understand what part of the document you're referring to, and Ms. Rodriguez definitely understand the value of those organizations. I've had the thrill of getting to work with people like Curtis Acosta, Calvin Terrell, a fantastic group at San Francisco called E3 Education, Equity, and Excellence, and no shortage of these types of partners that are eager to work with us, and I think vice versa. The question about the proposal is, are we looking for a good faith effort, or is there something more specific that you're looking for in terms of these partnerships, knowing that oftentimes these partnership processes have to go through requests for proposals depending on the size of the financial commitment of the partnership. And so we wouldn't want to skirt any procurement processes by agreeing to something at the meet and confer table that would then compromise an RFP process. So could you clarify just a bit more than about the proposal? Is it we want to move in this direction and you want to see evidence of it? And again, we could do some kind of a check-in in the fall about that. Or is there something that's more specific that you're looking for in an agreement?
Yeah, no, that's the first part you said is exactly, we want a commitment from the district saying and I think you use best faith as we want to ensure that this is happening, right? We appreciate the work that WestEd presented to the governing board and the presentation that they gave. And I'll be honest with you, it was probably a dose of reality for a lot of people. And we want to ensure that community organizations are a part of it. And yeah, our ask is that, we're not asking to commit to 4 community we're asking to commit to doing this, to making this part of our district, ensuring that these community organizations are a part of it and actually a part of it, not just, hey, we're going to contact these people to check a box. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay.
No, I definitely understand. I mean, from the human resources perspective, anti-bias training, very helpful, obviously, anti-racism training. I always think one of the places that we struggle the most in schools is doing the identity work. You really need to understand yourself, where you come from, how your sociocultural perspective shades the world, and how it is that you conceive of and think of things around diversity and inclusiveness as almost a precursor to understanding some of the awareness building that you'll get from organizations like Transcorp Pueblo or Puente Human Rights or the ACLU, or even was going to say teaching tolerance, but I know that they just changed their name, and I can't quite recall what it is.
Learning for Justice or Teaching for Justice.
Thank you, Teaching for Justice. And so we're looking at doing that identity work. It's already a piece where, yes, partnership with community organizations would be very beneficial to us. Now, whether or not we have the money to do that, the capacity to do that, the conditions to make that partnership work is what the big question is going to be. But in terms of a sort of good faith effort, I think that administration, again, when we huddle up, we can have something ready by Thursday at 5 that would express, our, I wouldn't just say like willingness in the same way that tolerance is a limited term, but our enthusiasm for moving into this direction even more so as we're building that capacity around the district to have conversations about identity, equity, diversity, inclusiveness, justice, schooling as a political act, education as a source of reproduction or production. And manifesto might be a good word for all those things, where we find them. So I'm definitely eager to do that. But I would say Thursday 5, let's see if we can cook up some language that would show that good faith effort.
Definitely. And I'm glad that you mentioned Curtis Acosta, because he and I have talked at length about ethnic studies here in Phoenix, Arizona, along with also the Chicano Institute for Teaching and Organizing Collective. And they're down to meet with you at any time. I just have to give them a date and time.
Oh, Curtis is a homie. I've known that guy for going on 10 years. And so, yes, we actually have talked a couple of different times. It's all about entry points. It really is all about the right time and the place for these types of partnerships. So yeah, definitely eager.
Great. Well, we'll look forward to hearing from you Thursday at 5 with that one. I appreciate all the comments from that, Dr. Diaz, Dr. Brown, and Felina. Thank you, and April too. So let's throw it to Chelsea for 8C.
Yeah, so for the final part of this proposal that we wanted to talk about today is the part C, so changing deficit language. So our ask is, in collaboration with our BLM resolution, we must change all language used in our district communications, as it is language that views our students, teachers, and families from a deficit lens. An example of something that we would be looking to change would be achievement/opportunity gap. Instead of saying that, we would say educational debt, because it is something that we do owe back to the student. It's not their fault if there is any gap in their knowledge, so to speak. But we just thought this goes hand in hand with the equity plan and is something that the district should begin to strive for.
Yeah, as a member of the equity team, I'd be happy to speak to this just a bit. This has been a very interesting part of our work on the equity team. Words matter. Words matter a ton. Words are a reflection of our consciousness. Fred writes about and Don Macedo write about the word and the world. There's a reason those two words sound so similar to each other. And so it's one of the things that we've done in the equity team. We want to create the conditions where people may see some of these things, I wouldn't say on their own, but through the types of professional developments that we've discussed. We've been trying to be very mindful of entry point when it comes to language, having things in a nomenclature that people can access, so that we're not going too far over their heads. And in that sense, even risking some of the balance. I'll use an example that there's another district right now that's under attack for trying to include critical race theory in its equity work. They haven't really, in my opinion, built the base for people to understand what critical race theory is to begin with, to withstand the pressures they're now getting to drop that from their equity plans. And so it's been something that we've been trying to be mindful of. Again, is making sure that we're using language that we understand enough across the board to move conversations forward, in the hopes that those conversations will lead to something that you're pointing out right here. The idea that the achievement gap is not an accurate term, that's been around since at least 2004, where the term achievement gap really rose out of the manufacturing crisis that we saw in the 80s and 90s, trying to explain how we had these disparate outcomes in education, intentionally not trying to talk about the inputs, because if we talk about the inputs, we're starting to talk about justice, and we're starting to talk about the distribution of goods in a community. At the same time that's been a conversation since at least 2004, we still see achievement gap throughout because I don't believe we do an adequate job with that consciousness building. We do a lot of awareness raising, but at the end of the day, it's about conscientization. And it's your conscientization that ultimately is going to lead you to the point where you're going to choose words that more intentionally mean the things that you're trying to say. I don't know if we've reached that point yet as a district, and I would be a little afraid of getting a little too involved with the choosing of language that the equity committee came up with, because I believe that they have the best sense of where we are as an organization. So it's not that I support deficit language or support the use of it. It's sort of one of these realizations that I would like to see other people realize instead of skipping this critical step in your consciousness building, and instead being catered language that actually exceeds one's consciousness.
Can I ask a question, Vic? So what PDs have we been offered that actually teach us about conscientização, which is how Ferry pronounces it in the Portuguese? Because I notice we do talk a lot about anti-racist, anti-bias, and you're right, those are very modern terms, but have we even discussed like the levels of consciousness or naive consciousness, magical consciousness, and critical consciousness with teachers in our PDs? Because I feel like that's also something that will help build people with this language. And as Freire says, nothing comes without resistance. So definitely it's no surprise that a lot of what we are pushing for equity is always going to be met with resistance.
Yeah, great questions. I mean, the short answer is no. I think that if you pull the vast majority of people around the district and you ask, do you know who Paulo Freire is? You know who Donald Macedo is? You know who Peter McLaren is? You know, Antonio Darder, like anybody that comes out of that critical pedagogy or resistance pedagogy, no, we're not there yet. I think that we need to arrive there. I know that from our department, it's really looking at, again, through the identity process. The more you understand about who you are and how you see the world and how the world has been shaped by the words that you use and the experiences that you've had and the experiences you've been given down to, I think the more it opens up for that. But I am very eager as a member of the equity team to begin to move into those parts of understanding critical pedagogies. And no, we're not there yet. I don't also think that we're going to get there by putting a magic quarter and a magic carousel that we're all going to all of a sudden be able to ride with one another. I think that it's going to take a much more intentional look at the next 1, 3, 5 years, looking through the professional development points of the equity plan. And that's work I'm really eager to start to dig into.
Dr. Diaz, I have a question. So I know you're saying you want to see these conversations starting to happen more organically, I guess, like among teachers. Do you see the district offering PDs in the future that kind of address how teachers can speak to one another or call each other out in a safe, respectful way? That way we can feel comfortable starting that dialogue, because you're right, it does start with us and within ourselves, but how can we learn to have that conversation in a safe way with our coworkers?
Oh, that's a wonderful question, Chelsea. Yeah, I mean, yes is the short answer. We want to move into that place. I've seen this done in a few different places. I happen to be in Kyrene when we adopted Courageous Conversations About Race, and we sent a team of principals to New Orleans to go to the Courageous Conversations Conference. You know, that was 12 years ago. Did that radically change the Kyrene School District? Absolutely not. Did it empower certain leaders who are now running a lot of stuff there? Yeah. It's been the sort of slower burn sort of change. Other organizations or places I've been a part of, I mean, one of my critical questions for the folks in Tucson who started Mexican American Studies, you know, one of the things I think that gets underanalyzed is, well, how did this start? And the first thing they'll tell you, it did not start from somebody at the district office level telling everybody at the schools, hey, we're going to do ethnic studies, and here's how we're going to do it. Here's the PD plan. Here's the scope and sequence. Here's how it aligns to Prop 301 hours. And all these pieces. It does arrive through a organic critical consciousness. It usually starts with book clubs and book circles and things like that. And so I think that's always a question for growing this kind of work. I'm really motivated by the work of Angela Valenzuela, who writes a lot about planting seeds and growing trees You may even see in a lot of our work we're doing in HR right now, we're not talking about pipelines into the profession anymore. We're trying to use more organic language like pathways. And that's not on accident. But there is a sort of organic nature to this. Knowing that it's organic, though, it doesn't mean that we want to like sit on our hands and wait for it to grow. That's not the way that things grow. You have to till the soil, you have to find the right seeds, and you have to feed them. And I think that's the place that we're now starting to move in on the equity team. I couldn't be prouder of the equity plan that we presented and that the governing board received at the work study. It gives us such a baseline for where we are now, and now all of these entry points to start entering in a lot of these different conversations, whether it has to do with critical race theory or disruptive pedagogies or culturally responsive teaching, anti-bias, identity development for youth as well as for adults. I think I can see all those different inroads. The challenge for us as an equity team is really saying what are the ones we want to start working on, and how do we hit go and go hard.
Well, and just as a thank you, Dr. Diaz. But even just like taking it like 30 steps back from where we're at, because the conversation we're having right now is great. But let's be honest, a lot of the percentage of this district isn't ready to have this conversation, and at the same time, there are common words that are happening in schools. I'm just as guilty as it. For example, like calling a student a low student, that's like, it makes me cringe just saying it, but I probably said it a month ago, and it's what are we doing to eliminate even just language like that, such as high students, low students, etc. Because we need to be there too before we go anywhere else. You get what I'm saying?
And I do think that there are some low-hanging fruits, and achievement gap, opportunity gap to education, that may be one of them. I would be eager to see what other ones are out there. I know that one of the things that I hear quite a bit is, I don't even want to say it, but I hear people say SPED kids. And that just drips of, it's very problematic, whether you want to look at it through a people's first language, or just sort of unpacking what it is that we're describing when we use a term like that. Now, certainly it's much more of a mouthful to say a student with special needs, but there's a humanity that lacks when we're using acronyms before we even call somebody a scholar or student, but rather just refer to them as a kid while we refer to others as students. So I do think there's some sort of low-hanging fruits there, but very much the same. When I became an educator in the early 2000s, that was a time when we were trying to teach kids to not use not use the word gay to describe something that was weird. And it was so important in that space and time, and it's still something we're working on, to not just tell somebody, no, don't use that, don't say that. You have to sit in that uncomfortability, and you have to unpack that a bit. You have to arrive at it, because if you just say don't say it, what you're actually doing is you're silencing it. And as you start to silence it, you'll marginalize it even more, because now you're not allowing somebody to speak towards it. And I think we're at a critical point as a district there with things like the achievement opportunity gap and the educational debt, with terms like I said, the one that I hear quite often in the district. I think if there's other low-hanging fruits that exist like that folks see in the equity plan or the strategic plan, I think that would be a powerful thing to take to the equity team and have them analyze. And as a team that has such a heartbeat on so many people in so many places in the district, really start to say whether or not we're ready to make those kinds of shifts versus the ones that actually let's all go and read about the educational debt. Let's all read that article. Let's all do a book study on that before we just start taking the find replace tool to the equity plan.
So Dr. Diaz, I feel like you answered my question that I'm about to ask just a bit, but I want to ask you, what do you foresee as like the first step to actually starting to tackle this? Like, how do we follow praxis here? What are we doing to follow praxis?
Well, I think that there's a couple ways to answer it, because it's also at what level, at an institutional level or at an individual level, at a ideological level, at an instructional level. It's a really large question to just sort of like tease out the grain size in terms of where we are. In terms of
sorry to interrupt you, but I think that our question is pretty much at the instructional level in the classroom with our students. How are we following praxis? What are the steps that we can take, or what do you foresee as being the first step to getting to a place where we can start having those conversations and start actively, helping people unlearn this kind of mindset?
Yeah, great question. I think it's hard to say. Going back to our question or our conversation about differentiation, what I would not want to do is to sit down and take like a couple hours here at my desk at Emerson Court and like bang out a process for this. I don't think that would serve us particularly well. I do think it's in questions about identity. One of the things that we did at New Teacher Orientation a couple of years ago is we asked people why they became a teacher, but we made them do a 5 whys chart to really dig into their experiences that led them to that. We then had them put those on Post-it notes, and we put them as the roots of a tree. And we talked about the ways in which those experiences that you had as a child, or those experiences you had early in your career, they're really feeding your tree of, I think we called it a tree of life. And by that, we meant like a tree of teacher life. And it starts with, I think, those types of professional development exercises where we look at who we are, what we believe, and why we believe it. I think it also, another entry point is using an equity framework an equity lens to view current situations that we're no longer just uncomfortable with, but we want to see change towards. Using protocols and processes, particularly through the equity committee. I think that those are places where we see that coming. I mean, what I would love to see at some point would be a differentiated series on affirming diversity, or even like affirming diversity might be the 2.0 course, whereas the 1.0 might be around that identity development work. And then that 3.0 might be about, okay, so you've affirmed it, but the limitations of that perspective of just affirming diversity. Well, first of all, who gets to affirm and who gets affirmed is a question you always ask when you talk about affirming diversity. So I'd like to see a point where we would see that sort of tiered professional development. I think that we are not there, but we're eager to start growing that. Also to the institutional level, we got said earlier, but I do think this is important. The chief academic officer as a role that's changing is certainly something we need to be sensitive to. I am highly encouraged that in the chief academic officer hiring selection process, the equity team interviewed the candidates outside of the panel interview. And so there was a whole second interview that was done completely through the lens of the equity team. And I think that we're going to see the fruits of that labor in what Dr. Gonzalez brings to us. And so I'm eager to answer that question of what would that look like, or how do we see that moving forward as we work through the summer.
Dr. Diaz, in reference to this, I think the bigger ask here is we're really looking for a commitment to momentum in this field. For example, when I asked you a question earlier, you mentioned a great PD that sounded like it was 12 years ago, which I was 14. That's too much time in between. So I guess I want to know is how can we commit to momentum in keeping a driving forward, I guess. So, and I know that's something you'll probably have to think a little bit more about and kind of hone out with your team.
And to kind of
and I'd say don't undersell the importance of that equity plan. That equity plan now sits right next to our strategic plan in a way that we're going to be able to build off of for years to come. And it's that equity plan, I think, that's missing in districts that now, when the resistance comes, there's little to hold on to, or you find out that that equity plan doesn't hold up and withstand that sort of resistance. But I like that phrase of a commitment to momentum, and definitely want to think more about what are the things we could do. Again, not just at the district level, at the school level, at the classroom level, at the DCTM level, or these other sort of PD spaces that we have in the district.
If I can add off of what Chelsea was just saying, just thinking about these conversations, I know my principal provides one article with his weekly updates. And, unfortunately, I think many of us are naive to this type of language. We've come to hear the achievement gap, our children who receive, resource, what to help bring those words into conversation. It could start with a simple article. And then just, providing that momentum. Let's be honest, in our LOI, how do we address our kids? we have to address all parts of them. And so even just with simply restructuring our LOI, with utilizing those new and more appropriate terms, just something as simple as that. So I think we're also looking at it maybe, from a PD perspective, but also how we can simply start those changes. And I think that's something that, you want it to, like you said, you wanted it to start organically, but how can we start it organically in a way that we do on an everyday level or everyday process?
And also, if I can add and bring it back to 8B, this is why those community partnerships are absolutely critical, especially when it comes to deficit language, and why it is important that we make these changes.
So going back to the proposal and the agreement, it sounds like in the proposal, you're looking for that good faith, you're looking for that commitment to momentum, and tying this back to 8B. And I would also say 8A. It's in, I used to, excuse me, when I worked in another district, we did a SEI course, and it was very exciting that as a district, we got through the 45 hours. And we did a little survey at the very beginning about how you even think about something as SEI. And we came up with 2 different tracks of the SEI course based on your level of consciousness and awareness around diversity, and especially linguistic diversity. And those are the sorts of things I think that we're eager to start building here. It's going to take some time. There's change at the very top that's happening right now. And then to the point that was said earlier, I think that there's also some complexity we don't want to smooth over at the classroom level, where we have seen the differences of opinions or differences of perspectives, probably is a much more better term. The differences of perspectives that pertains to even some of the things that are currently in the equity plan. And so I do think that we can find something in our agreement that would express that sort of commitment. But I think more importantly, it's that accountability that we would need to see that's held throughout. I know that I'm definitely going to leave this conversation thinking more about some of my hesitations to do certain things as a district leader. We may not have to be as hesitant about, and that's definitely a very encouraging thing to know.
So then I'm just trying to figure out, when we are addressing deficit language, like you said, they were the low-hanging fruit. So what is our first step to reach that productive discomfort? Because I do want to clarify the middle ground. All of these pieces are part of what we call characteristics of white supremacy culture, and they're embedded in every parts of our systems, and we need to actively think about these. So what is your first step, or what will you be able to bring back to us in regards to creating momentum in regards to this resolution and addressing these low-hanging fruit?
It's a great question. I think I want to talk to our principal colleagues here, and I'm sorry that I've been doing so much talking on this one, as well as to Dr. Brown, people in that department, for us to determine it. I think it would be helpful. The example that you have here is very helpful. If there are other ones that you do see in the equity plan, in the strategic plan, the strategic plan was written in 2016. Our organizational consciousness is at a way different level than it was back then. And we already see certain things in the strategic plan that no longer really capture how we talk about things like organization development, for instance, anymore. And so if you have other examples that you could share Thursday at 5, I think that would be helpful. And then on the flip side, if we could start thinking about ways, I can see in my head right now something that would say that at the principal level, at the CNI, at the HR level, these are the sorts of things that we're committing ourselves to through differentiation, through partnership, and through advancing discussion about identity, diversity, and justice, identity, diversity. And I mean, you can hear I'm already starting to try to flesh that thing out in my head. So I'll stop there, but I'll see what we can put together by Thursday at 5. And I think we'll be able to push this into a pretty good place.
So that said, it is well past our stopping time, and we do appreciate everyone for hanging in there with us for these last 10 minutes over our usual ending time. But before we leave, I just want to quickly drop a couple links in the chat. Maybe if anyone wants to peruse them at your own leisure, and it talks about a lot of the stuff that Felina was speaking about, and a lot of the other stuff that we were speaking about as a team. So I'm going to go ahead and do that really quickly.
And while she's dropping those links, this will be an official time check at 5:26. I think we should probably table any other discussions we did have, potentially, Dr. Diaz, unless there's anything you wanted to say about the evaluations. It sounds like probably not right now.
No, it's funny that when you click that, I was like, scheduling, what proposals I'm scheduling? So my apologies. Yeah, I mean, and I did send some language earlier today with regards to the evaluations, and so you could take a look at that. I think we're at a really good point where there's quite a bit that we have to consider regarding proposal 8, but we'll also have a response in proposal 1 and 3 by 5 o'clock on Thursday. And if we're not there at 5 o'clock on Thursday, I'll make sure that you know that. And if we need to come back to the table to say, here's some ideas that we have, it's definitely something we can do.
And thank you, Dr. Diaz. And this is going to be my weekly edition of asking about classroom site fund money. Is there a plan yet? And is that potentially something we could talk about? I know we don't have to schedule until Thursday at 5, but is that something you'd be potentially ready to talk about on next Monday's meeting? Is how we're going to allocate that, or what are you thinking?
I will try. There's quite a bit of moving pieces happening right now with the M&O budget and with the classroom site and the M&O budget, as well as the influx of dollars that we're getting from the federal government in the form of ESSER funds. Mm-hmm. We just posted a couple positions in the district that's helping us get on top of that. We have an ESSER grants coordinator position that just posted, as well as an ESSER grants technician position that just posted. And so we're all sort of playing catch up. Let me see what kind of update I could have Thursday at 5 regarding that. But I know this is something that I'm really feeling a lot of heat from a lot of different directions that we need to get this worked out in terms of what we can do with classroom site fund. We are going to need to do that collaboratively. I think we're in a similar position to where the district may have been back in 2014 when it made the decision to withhold 301 in order to bank it, in order to sustain TIF 4 in the long run. It's something that has seriously benefited many people in the district, but it's come at the cost of a few others. I shouldn't say a few others, but substantially more every year. And so we may be at a very much the same spot. So I do think that we need to collaboratively look at it to make sure we don't make the same mistakes that other people made. But at the same time, we're finding ways to use these funds in a way that's going to sustain compensation for years to come.
Great. So I'm hearing feedback. I hear my voice. So that's horrible. I think that we have a list of what is due from y'all, and then from us, we'll just be providing the agenda from Thursday. Go ahead, Vic.
Yeah, I think the agenda, the other low-hanging fruit that may exist in the language as you all have started to view the strategic plan, the equity plan, through a different lens, or I shouldn't say different lens, through a more advanced lens in the equity plan. I think we would also like to have that by 5 o'clock. We're also still awaiting any news from PECTA in terms of proposal 6. And so if you want to take another look at where we are with proposal 6, I think that ball's in your court right now.
Yep.
That would be another thing we could do before Thursday at 5.
Mm-hmm. And just for the sake of time, actually, you know what? No, we'll table this one until next time. We'll table to next time. It's for the sake of time, I'm going to stop talking. So unless anyone else has anything for the good of the cause, we'll go ahead and call the meeting. Practicing good wait time. Okay, thank you to everyone that's been watching on YouTube. Thank you for everyone that came on today, and thank you to both teams for a productive meeting that I think will impact our district positively. So thanks, everyone.